4 minutes.
Chairman, Minister, I wanted to raise this issue because it's becoming more of an issue and it's more prevalent in my day-to-day work in the area, and I don't know whether it's just around South Central where houses could be a certain age, climate change, things like that, change of weather. But when you look at St. Teresa's Gardens and other large local authority flat complexes, it's also an issue of mould, dampness, condensation, all these things that come into it. And from particularly working with specific people that are sitting tenants, and it's come to my attention that in relation to a void, a council house becoming a void, there is Department of Environmental money that goes in to bring that house up to the BRE standard. But yet if you're an actual sitting tenant, you cannot access any of that money. And yet you are, as a tenant, then advised that if you need any repairs, responsibility of tenant carrying out repairs due to condensation. That is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is an actual insulation of their homes. But what the anomaly is, like an apartheid, that a council tenant can't apply for a grant, as I would do if having a mortgage, and that you cannot apply for a grant for insulation, or neither can the local authority do that. And what I'm raising here is that we have a climate change bill coming into action. We're talking about a national policy on this issue about trying to bring down fuel emissions, the using of fossil fuels, etc. And yet, in probably one of the largest housing stocks in the country, local authority housing, we have not got, tenants cannot access that insulation. And the problem here as well is that from the point of view of the tenants, they cannot go and get loans now through their credit unions. It's not an option for them because the money is so scarce at the moment. And I think this could be something that could be looked at the climate change bill through the local authorities, either them being able to apply for grants for homes. I think ideally there should be a national programme of public works in all council homes and in public buildings and schools, where we have a situation in our own school, in the school up in Bluebell, where they're crying out for insulation because of the amount of heat leaving the building. But I think this is very specific, and I'd like the Minister's opinion on it in relation to that. Can it feed into that? Is there a basis for looking at changing legislation to allow council tenants either accessing that grants for insulation or through the local authorities, or is there plans in the pipeline for the Department of Environment to actually start doing this in council tenants? I'd just like to say one last point. Deputy Daly raised about unemployed going on to doing local authority work, outdoor local authority work. But I think if Deputy Daly is sitting twiddling his thumbs any day, he should maybe go down and make himself available, because he'd be getting well paid for it. And if it's work there to be done, it should be paid for.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. To respond, you 4 minutes, Minister.
Thanks very much, and I'd like to thank Deputy Collins for raising this matter. And I'll share your concern, Deputy Collins, on the need to address the issue of inadequate insulation and draft proofing in older local authority housing stock. Given the constraints on capital budgets across all areas of the public service, my department is now placing greater emphasis on local authority social housing improvement programmes to improve living conditions and comfort levels for tenants. The enhancement of energy efficiency standards remains a priority within my department. And as you said, Deputy Collins, the grants under the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland scheme are for private houses, and they fall within the remit of my colleague, the Minister for Communications, Energy and Natural Resources. In the past, funding for housing maintenance programmes was provided from the local authority's own internal capital receipts. However, with the decline in internal capital receipts, funding has been provided from my department for the retrofitting and improvement of their stock, particularly in relation to retrofitting of energy efficiency measures. Under my department's social housing investment programme, local authorities are allocated funding each year in respect of a range of measures to improve the standard and overall quality of their social housing stock. The programme includes a retrofitting measure aimed at improving the energy efficiency of older apartments and houses by reducing heat loss through the fabric of the building. But again, Deputy Collins, as you pointed out, over the past 2 years, the retrofitting measures focused on improvement works on vacant houses or voids, with the objective of returning as many as possible of these dwellings to productive use and combating dereliction and associated antisocial behaviour. Over that period, €52.5 million was recouped to local authorities in respect of improvements carried out on 4,774 dwellings, but they were voids, they weren't occupied houses. I'm currently reviewing the terms of the energy retrofitting measures for 2013 to target grants at those older houses and apartments which lack adequate insulation and draft proofing. Local authorities should pay particular attention to dwellings which accommodate older people and people with disabilities. My department will issue revised guidelines to local authorities in the context of capital allocations under the housing programme for 2013. Work is currently underway in this regard, and my department requested local authorities to submit details of their capital requirements under the various measures within the housing programme. This information is being assessed at present, and I intend to advise individual authorities of their capital allocations as soon as possible. The retrofitting programme offers a very practical and cost-effective way for local authorities to improve the standard of their housing stock. The programme brings immediate as well as long-term benefits for the community as a whole in terms of sustaining and creating jobs and delivering a greener Ireland for the future, and also incidentally reduces people's bills, which is a very important consideration. It's clear to me that we need better information to give sharper focus to the overall National Improvement Works programme and to better target resources at areas which will give the best return on the investment made. My department, in conjunction with the local authorities, has now commenced an audit of the 130,000 social housing units. Over time, this will build up a comprehensive profile of the stock and enable the compilation of planned housing maintenance programmes locally and the development of targeted strategies to address deficiencies in terms of thermal efficiency, etc. And next year I intend to use the results of the audit to inform the capital allocations to local authorities. So just to be clear, the last 2 years were about vacant houses, and that was to get them back into use. But I've specifically asked that we now focus on occupied houses, where you have, in many cases, tenants for a long time who have maintained as best they can their house, but they have serious problems with dampness, etc. So I'd like to thank Deputy Collins for raising the issue.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy, if you wish supplementary.
Yeah, thanks very much for that response, Minister. But I think it is an urgent area to be addressed quite quickly. I mean, I have 2 instances here of a young woman with 2 children who moved into her house in Drimnagh in 2010, just after the BRE rating became part of the standard of housing. And nearly every week she has to wash down the walls in every single room of her downstairs in the house. 2 young children who had to be moved out of their house over Christmas because it was in such a state. The response we're getting from the council, open windows, open your vents, don't dry your wet clothes in the house. They're doing all these things, and the same thing keeps repeating herself. And she's caught in the bind. She can't go out and get the grant to even insulate the home, damp excluded, the whole lot. And yet she's getting no assistance from the council in relation to this. And it's getting to the stage where she doesn't even see her home anymore. Another family down in Pimlico, in Pym Street, for 4 years, the same problem, mould. They're wiping down. They've used all the killing the chemicals to kill mould, doing it every second day, keeps returning. It's going onto their bedclothes, it's going onto their mattresses. It's just becoming a nightmare for families that have this problem. And it's also recognition of the local authorities in saying, yeah, there is a problem here, but they're not even recognising that, and that's part of the problem. I think we have to link in, as you said, local authority housing, and even I asked the Department of Environment, was there a list of complaints made about mould? They said there's no list. Now there has to be, because there have been complaints made every day of the week. This person in Pym Street has been making complaints for the last 2 years about it. So there's something wrong somewhere, and I think maybe there really has to be a root and branch saying, where are the problems? Identify them, and then how do we get around them? I don't know whether next year might be too long, but is there some way in the immediate term that can be accessed to grants if people think they can go for them?
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, to respond.
Just to clarify, first of all, we do want to gather the information, as you said, and find out, where those houses are. So we've asked the local authorities to do that. But I do hope this year, Deputy Collins, to be able to use some of this year's 2013 money to divert the money that was used for the voids to occupied houses for this year, and then to develop further programmes with the information that we're gathering from the local authorities.
Deputy, I now call on Deputy Joan Collins.
Taoiseach, according to the report by Mr Magdelenes, there was no single or simple story of the Magdalene laundries. Well, A system of slavery, servitude and enforced labour is a single, simple story of the Magdalene laundries, and I'm glad that you recognise that tonight in the apology given by the state in relation to that era that women were subjected to over the decades. And I think more so, I think as Maureen said, the women here tonight really said it all from the point of view we could welcome it, but it wasn't our welcome, it was their welcome of your apology to them tonight that will make the difference. And I think whether a girl or a woman was put in by the criminal justice system, the Legion of Mary, the parish priest, family members, their human rights are equal and have the same human rights as anybody else. And the church and state ignored these rights over those decades in relation to these women. The fact was that the state inspectors visited these institutions. They went in, they visited them, checked them, and walked out and said nothing. The guards accepted the status quo and implemented the status quo. I remember seeing a picture of the Magdalene women. It must have been some a church event, and the line of police and guards right down beside a group of women, so they couldn't run away, and if they did try and run away, they were going to be pulled back in again. That must have been a terrible situation to be facing into as young women, and not knowing why they were there, etc. And for other people in the industrial reform schools, the psychiatric institutions, Bethany homes that hasn't been mentioned here tonight, and I think it should be referenced in relation to this. This was an Ireland then who ignored the League of Nations 1926 Slavery Convention Act abolishing slavery, and we ratified that in 1930. It ignored the International Labour Organised Forced Labour Convention, which was ratified in 1931, and that was to suppress the use of forced compulsory labour. And it ignored the European Convention on Human Rights in 1953. And yet the Church and State allowed the laundries to continue. It ignored the rights to liberty and freedom from arrest and detention. It ignored the right to be free from cruel and inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. And it ignored the right to respect for family life and the right to freely participate in the cultural life of the community. We are collectively responsible for the wrongdoings done to all the women in the Magdalene laundries, and they will obtain redress, and they will have an enforceable right to compensation. It was 20 months ago at which the state was given a year to put in place from the European Court of Human Rights. And I really welcome the statement by the Taoiseach that we have a judge, John Quirk, who will be put in place to make recommendations within 3 months. The terms of reference have not been set out. I hope they'll be the references from the Justice for Magdalenes, who clearly have called for a dedicated unit within the Department of Justice to facilitate access to pensions, unpaid wages and services, housing, medical cards, access to all their needs. That a commission for financial reparation, that is preservation of the historical records, and insistence on transparent and accountable appeal system, and an appeals process along with that. The four orders should apologise and they should play part in the redress, but I do not. I think we have to insist that that would not hold up any movement by the state, as what's been said earlier on, to put funding in to redress the situation. I just lastly want to say I salute the women who never gave up believing in themselves, who recognise themselves as human beings. I don't know if I would have had the strength to have fought on this issue. And I have to say, we see you, we hear you, and we believe you.